Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Madhavan, for introducing the panel. And I think we'll start. Before we begin, I just want to say a few things. The anti-defection law was added to the Constitution to prevent political defections. The reason being that these defections undermine the foundations and the principles of our democracy. What it basically does is that if there is any vote on any particular issue in the House, and if the political party issues a direction, then all MLAs belonging to that, MLAs or MPs belonging to that political party have to abide by the party's direction. The problem with this is that it restricts legislators in exercising their independent thought and carrying out their role in an independent manner. Legislators the primary responsibility is to hold the government accountable, and in turn, they are also accountable to the people who have actually elected them to their office. So if a legislator always has to abide by their party's directions, then they can't do both. They can't hold the government accountable, they also can't represent their constituents' viewpoints in the House. If a legislator is actually always at a risk of losing their seat if they do not abide by the party's directions, what it does is it shifts the power from the legislator to actually whoever controls the political party, and it entirely sort of twists the idea of how we understand our parliamentary democracy on its head. There are reasons most of us assume that people vote on party lines, and hence the argument is that, since we voted for such and such party, the legislators should always sort of vote on the basis of what the party says. But that's not always the case, right? People also vote for an individual, and we also see that political parties spend a lot of time and energy and resources in identifying individual candidates who can stand in the elections. Parties also have common themes and common ideologies that tie them together. And the assumption is that most MLAs or MPs who have joined a political party agree to those ideologies. But it's almost impossible, right, that everybody who's a part of a group, or in this case a political party, will always adhere to the same ideology or agree on everything that is being discussed and debated. There may be cases where a bill or an issue is getting debated in parliament or say in a legislative assembly, where the legislator may not agree with what the party's position is, or the issue is adversely affecting the legislator's constituents. But the anti-defection law ties their hands. They still cannot bring up their independent thinking or their constituents' viewpoints ahead. We have seen this in other countries also, like let's take the example of, say, the US, where, say, abortion rights or gun control laws are extremely partisan issues. But we have also seen that there are, say, Republican leaders who are pro-gun control laws. So there, the legislators actually have the freedom to vote based on their beliefs, their conscience, or what they think their people who have voted them into power may want. But in India, that's pretty much impossible, because a legislator will always risk losing their seat if they vote based on their conscience. So how do we ensure that our legislators can hold the government accountable and in turn can represent their constituents better in our legislatures? There has been some talk of some reforms over the last few years. There have been a few private member bills that we have seen that have been introduced in Parliament, which largely talk about diluting the law and restricting the anti-defection law only to, say, no confidence votes in the House. However, as Madhavan said, we think that the anti-defection law must be repealed, as it seriously undermines the role of legislators and restricts decision-making to a few people who control political parties and not to individual legislators. So with that, I will sort of hand over to our panelists here today. Dr. JP, you've been a legislator, you've been a civil servant, and you've long been a scholar, and sort of you've thought and talked about these issues a lot. I think we can start by sort of hearing some opening thoughts and remarks that you have about the anti-defection law.
Prachi, I must first confess that I played a significant, not decisive, but significant role in the 91st Amendment. Because before that, 1/3 defections were rewarded, fewer than that penalized. I remember in Ritesh's state, his party suffered a great deal. If I remember, BSP had 54 MLAs at that time, 11 defected. The poor speaker could not decide whether 11 is less than 1/3 of 54 or more than 1/3 of 54 for 3 years. So this tamasha was simply not right. Therefore, I was part of the 91st Amendment. Arun Jaitley was the minister at the time, and Mr. Advani and Dr. Manmohan Singh, others, they all agreed. But I have come to believe that it's been a disaster overall. It has failed to, if I may go through a few slides in just 5 minutes' time. Could you put up the slide, please? Normally, I don't like PowerPoint presentations, but today on this issue, I thought there must be some clarity. It actually failed to prevent defections. And defections to the ruling party are perfectly okay. In general, somehow or other, they were never penalized. But defections to the opposition, in general, they were the ones that were penalized. And second, as Madhavan said and as you said, it has damaged Indian democracy enormously by stifling debate and by enabling extremely stupid legislations which have had profound consequences in the evolution of our polity. I'll give only 2 examples here. Both, I think, had transformed Indian democracy not in a good way. Muslim Women's Bill. It was a terrible legislation, we all know that. Many Congress legislators opposed it. But because of the whip, they had to fall in line. In my judgment, much of the communal polarization in politics of India is a direct offshoot of that particular incident. Aditi ji, you know what happened. To overcompensate subsequent, I don't want to go into details. Take the impeachment proceedings of Justice Ramaswamy. This time, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao's prime ministership in 1993, the first one was in 1986. The only impeachment that went to the parliament for actual adjudication and voting. And the prime minister, for whatever reasons, decided to give a whip to his party, not to participate in the voting, therefore denying the minimum number required sitting and voting. And that is a direct, proximate cause for making judiciary in India utterly unaccountable. Today we have the unelected, unaccountable body which is calling the shots in every sense of the term. We can cite many more, but these 2, to my mind, are very profound. Next slide, please. Ultimately, notwithstanding what my namesake argued, Loknaik, JP, partyless democracy, etc., parties are an inevitable consequence of modern democracies, almost everywhere except Switzerland, etc., don't count much. But it doesn't mean that parties are deities. You elevate them to a level of God and say, therefore, deviating from the party line is so sinful that you have to penalize them. And in a country where, in general, political parties are autocratic, they're family fiefdoms or private estates, and we all know the truth. To give the party leadership that kind of power over the legislative process or democratic process is a disaster. I have no doubt whatsoever. Theresa May, or later Boris Johnson, or later Liz Truss, how are they removed? Because the majority in the House felt that they were not fit leaders. We have no such provision. And the anti-defection law does not even recognize it. The whole Maharashtra thing, without going into who is right, who is wrong, we don't care. Everybody is in the same boat, is absurd. If a group of legislators constituting a vast majority, they feel that X is not the right leader, that they have no right to decide the leadership of the legislature party, what is democracy then? If we are serious about it, let's democratize political parties. Like in Germany, we have a federal law. And let's go for an alternative system, either a proportional representation, actually not either, proportional representation, with certain safeguards to protect our democracy from excessive fragmentation. And B, a direct election at the state level where this whole problem simply disappears. Because legislators are not defecting for ideological reasons. It's to have a finger in the executive pie. Ours is a parliamentary executive system. And it has done immense damage. Apart from this, this is a smaller reason why we should switch over. Misgovernance has become endemic now in our states because MLA has a finger in every single thing. And even a good government cannot, a good chief minister cannot govern. And ensure rule of law, because many opposition people, when they join the ruling party, the complaint is we are neglected, our constituency is neglected. These are real complaints. And if you want to persevere with the existing law, then I think what they are looking at, as Prachi mentioned, is not a bad idea. Restrict this only to the lower house. Upper house is meaningless, both in the state and the union. Restrict only to no confidence motions and budget, because they determine the survival of the government. And give this power to the election commission. If you remember other disqualifications, the president or the governor has to take the advice of the election commission and shall be bound by that advice under the constitution, under articles 103 and 192. But ultimately systemic reform is what we require. At the state level, not at the union level, there's no time to go into that. A direct election of the chief minister and separation of powers, chief minister or governor, whatever you call him. And leadership changes being effected in internal democracy in the political parties so that the members call the shots, not the bosses calling the shots. I'm glad that PRS is raising this issue. It's a fundamental issue. We're all pretending it's not an issue. And it certainly hurt our democracy quite considerably, and made the flaws much more pronounced and decreased the health of the democracy. I hope that somebody is listening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Atul Bhatkhalkar, Maharashtra actually has been in the news for the past several months because of the recent case that happened. So do you want to sort of reflect on that or have any initial thoughts you want to share?
First of all, thanks to the PRS legislature for this wonderful topic and very important topic for discussion. Let me clear first that whatever I am going to speak, it is my all personal opinion, not my party opinion. Because I am in fact totally agree with whatever just Jayaprakash Narayan has stated. And in fact, after Jaipur incidents, when Sachin Pilot camp at Haryana, that time I had written one article in prominent Marathi daily, Lok Satta. And heading was that नेतेशाहीस मोकळीक ची सुट्टी केली पाहिजे आता, म्हणजे क्योंकि the singular effect of anti-defection law was that it killed totally inner party democracy, completely. That is the singular drawback of this anti-defection law. Despite anti-defection law, defection take place, whatever way we can find, we try to find out that way. And I can also give n number of examples. I know one example from one state where speaker did not decide on disqualification for 5 years. And so, as you said, Atal Bihari Vajpayee brought merger is the only option, and that is also with 2/3. But that also we deviated, we started giving resignation, and then we can re-elect again in many states. So, in my personal opinion, 2-3 things are required to do it. Totally abolition of anti-defection law is not much helpful. Then again, Bhajanlal era will start. Ayaram, Gayaram. In a moment, whole ministry will go to the another party. As on today, as he said, opposition members may switch over to the treasury party. But if there is no anti-defection law, then the moment in one state, any regional party get elected, they will make alliance with the central party or they will join central party. So that is not the real answer. 2-3 amendments should be brought. As you rightly said, that legislature has lost their power to discuss, to even dissent anything on laws. That is a different point, that how many MLAs or MPs really want to speak on bills and they want to discuss. That is a different scenario. But despite that, to use cruel word, the moment I enter into the Legislative Assembly, I became slave of the party. It's a very cruel word, but I have no choice. I cannot use my brain. And all political parties are issuing whips for anything, just because not attending meeting. Anti-defection law is not introduced for mayor not attending the party meeting or dissenting my views. And so, first, anti-defection law should be there, but only on the budget voting and no confidence motion. On other than these 2 points, anti-defection law should not be invoked. Legislators should be free to speak whatever they want on any bill. Only budget, if fails, then government falls in our parliamentary democracy. So, if any another bill is do not get majority despite introduced by government, then it's okay. Heaven will not fall on us. And so then it will be very healthy discussion. One more thing, if any legislator resigns once he get elected, then he cannot contest election in that term. Otherwise, this will go on, that 15 will resign, 20 will resign. So there is no point in that. And so for that particular term, he should be barred if he resign, because the anti-defection law, if I willingly tomorrow leave my party membership, then I depart from my legislature house. So that one more amendment should be there. And third amendment, all assembly levels disqualification should be decided by High Court judges, and in Parliament it should be decided by Supreme Court judge. If we introduce these 3 things, then we will in a position to take advantage of original spirit of anti-defection law. And at the same time, as you rightly said, that it totally stopped the debate within a parliament or within a legislature, that will again revive, because mere party dissent, it cannot be a anti-party activity. And so I can freely express my opinion regarding laws or any other political issues. And as you mentioned that Maharashtra is in news, see, that was the fallout of stringent anti-defection law. We contested with one party, putting photos of one leader. I got elected, and tomorrow morning I decided I will not go with them. Supreme Court also stated that this is not constitutional morality issue, this is a political morality issue. But ultimately, where people will go? They cheated people basically. And so, if we do all these things, I think anti-defection law will be more vibrant and it will serve its original purpose. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Ritesh Pandey, sir, you've all been an MLA in the state and now you're here in Parliament. What has been your sort of observations, and what do you think based on what Dr. JP and Mr. Bhatkhalkar have just said?
Thank you very much for having me. Before I start, as you had just mentioned, that I was the leader of the floor in the BSP. It was until my father, who eventually went and joined the Samajwadi Party, contested from there, won, I was removed from my leadership in the BSP. So I want to begin with this because obviously your consequences are not just limited to what you do within the party, but also what family members end up doing. But having said that, I very much agree with what the two panelists before me have said. One of the things that I find is that we have to look at it from the perspective of the voter as well. How much of the voter is actually aware what is happening once they have chosen their representative and they go and what they're doing within the party and how much of their voice is heard. Essentially, after about 15 years of active politics, I have lost one election, I've won two. Individuals, I think, at least in rural India, individual voters are not very aware of how laws are formed and by what laws MPs or MLAs are governed, and how free they are to vote or to argue their points once they go to the respective houses. I'm going to deviate a little bit here and come back on the anti-defection laws. Essentially, what I feel is that most voters see their, and this is obviously common knowledge, see their representative not just as somebody makes a law or sits and votes on laws. That's in the voters' understanding, that is the most minuscule job that they have, and it's not very important. What is really important for the voter is that you're present in their lives and helping them out with their daily challenges that they might be facing in their lives. So from getting a hospital bed in COVID to, or even without COVID, to getting an admission in a school, to getting a small patta that might have been challenged or a piece of land that might have been challenged by his neighbor or her neighbor, to then get it in their favor, and they would do the rounds everywhere, not just to the MLAs, MPs, but whoever holds a power to influence. So when it comes to what individuals are doing inside the house and how they're voting, there is very little awareness on the part of the voter, and therefore MLAs and MPs, often their choices are determined by not what ideology you come from. I think very few would, I mean, obviously it's at the back of your head, you know, what you've been fighting for and all of these things, but at the same point, it's also where the power rests. How much can you help your constituents if you are in the opposition, and how important it is for you to do, in order to do something. If you pick up the phone and you call a local, you know, level SDM or SP or DM, unless you're in the ruling party, the chances of them taking you very seriously is far and beyond. You know, it's really far off. So for the 5 years, if you want to get re-elected, it becomes extremely important that you have an influence over the system, and that comes with being part of the ruling party. And therefore, you always see this horse trading that happens, and strategically people think whether they can form the government and come back in. So that's, I think, from the voters' point of view, they are very much involved in this hero worship, where they want their MLA and MP to be able to call an SP, DM, or whatever, and shout at them and demand them to do their work, whether right or wrong. And in order to get into those sort of positions, which is the ruling on the ruling side. Individual MPs and MLAs will go to all extents, which includes defecting from their party and jumping ship in order to achieve this. Now, whether it allows for an elected representative to do this, and whether it's morally correct or not, is obviously the big question. And most of us here would certainly agree that it isn't. You come in with a set of ideology, and that's what you would stick with. But I would again then take it back to the voter. How accountable is the voter keeping these individuals? And that is something we need to think about. And whether, when this happens, like for example, in Maharashtra, sorry, not in Maharashtra, in Karnataka and in Madhya Pradesh, there were re-elections within 6 months when people had defected from their parties. And I think, I think 11 out of the 17 in Telangana, in Karnataka came back to power. They got re-elected. And about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a similar percentage, 7 or 8 or maybe 10 also came back from in Madhya Pradesh. That essentially shows that the voter has actually endorsed their switch, at least to the ones that won. But again, the question is, and as an elected representative, I think that even these are influenced. So once you get into power, you've got 6 months. In these 6 months, you can go and promise all the roads, all the development work. You can get a lot of work done. You can get a district magistrate of your choice, a SP of your choice, transferred to the Zilla in order to get your work done, and therefore you have more influence. So all of these things run far deeper, and essentially we have to also think about how to educate our voters on these things. And this is something which will come with further maturity. I think in the last 75 years, Indian democracy has come a long way. I also feel that that awareness has improved many-folds with at least individuals like Kashiram who have gone out and actually educated a huge swatch of the Dalit community and made them aware of their rights to vote and how they can influence, how they can have influence over their own lives through this process. And that slowly has come up to a level, and I think this level needs to be further built up, where this understanding is rooted in terms of how to hold their MPs and MLAs accountable based on the ideology that they have come into power with. My second thing is, as part of I've been in the assembly in UP. Now I'm a member of parliament. I've experienced many things. I know that when Article 370 came up for debate, there were members all across in the opposition parties and also belonging to the other faith, maybe in different parties that were there, did not end up voting against it, even though they wanted to, because of this this law in place. So essentially, it then hampers your ability, and even they have to go back and answer to their constituents. So I know people that did not get up and speak because the party's view was to support, and they could not speak because if they did, then this law would come into place and they could be disqualified. And of course, then they face the brunt of their constituents, because obviously they're coming from a constituency, not only just belonging to they belong to the faith, but they also came from a constituency that was dominated by people who thought that that Article 370 should not be removed. So, this is the extent of of what it means. It also means that defying a particular constituency through its member, because they're part of a particular political party, which essentially in none of their manifestos, nothing they would have said that they were going to bring such a law in. And so they had subscribed to something, or to a political party that believed in what the status quo in Kashmir would be at the moment. But they eventually, because of the majority and the pressures of the majority, they ended up being quiet. And the ones that wanted to speak also to reach out to the constituency were not, well, they couldn't, because they could risk losing their membership. So, these are the things that obviously hampers the ability of an elected legislator to actually represent contrary to what the party wants them to, but keeping in mind their voters and what they wish for them to say. And finally, I would also bring it back to one more thing. I mean, Parliament and the assemblies more so, they don't function. There is, I think in UP, I had at the time it's called Rule 51. I had raised, while I was an MLA, and I had raised an issue about, that in the rules book, it says that 90 days have to, 90 days the assembly has to function. And it was on average over the last couple of years, if you look at it, it's reducing. And I'm sure in this year, it would even reduce further. They're functioning close to like 25, and I think now it's 15. So you can imagine, like, essentially, these members are just being elected. They go, they have, a status. They can go and call the SPDM. They have access to them. They can maybe take their constituent and make them visit them, which otherwise might be very, very difficult for them. But the legislator cannot hold the executive accountable until the House is functioning. That is where the powers are. I will give you two very small examples of, generally as an MP and MLA, yes, you get all these perks, and that makes you feel great. But at the same point, the real power or the ability to make a change lies within the House. And you realize that when you put questions, and especially in the Legislative Assembly. Because there, you can have the grassroots level impact that one hopes to have. So I'll give you an example, and I'm bringing this there again because you can then connect it to how we want to help our voters and how we want to make a change in their lives, and how, in order to have power to do so, you need to sometimes be in the ruling side, especially when the assembly does not function and you don't get your ways across. So let's say there was a piece of land that had been taken over by some strong men which belonged to the state. Now, I can call the SP and DM and I can give applications saying, and which I did, that the local villagers there have come to me. They've said that that piece of land where a local primary healthcare center is supposed to come up is not being built, and there are some strong men locally who are farming on this land. Now, after repeatedly telling the district magistrate, the SDM, and putting all these applications, nothing happened. The 15 days or so that Parliament Assembly functioned, and it functions for a week at a time, or maybe 3 days at a time in UP, I managed to get this one question across, and it came, and it was on the floor of the House, and I said that, is there this piece of land? Does the government own it? If yes, do they know that it has been encroached upon, and that primary health center is supposed to come there, and if it is, when is it going to come? I mean, when the day before that question was coming, it goes to a week before it goes to, I think, at the district magistrate's level, and they have to reply. Now, because they have to reply to the House and they cannot lie there, within a week, they you know, they had like a proper flourishing, you know, field on it, you know, with gehu and all of that coming. They plowed it. They constructed a little neve to show that the center was coming up, and they said, we're looking for more funds to build it. So essentially that came back because of the power of the House. Now, the public needs to have the Assembly and the Parliament function as much as possible to be aware of what is happening inside it and to understand that members, when they do go there, that's where the real impacts and where choices are made. You know, there was things on the budget that was spoken about, and also no confidence motion and everything. I think at the same point, there has to be some ability, some discussion that has to happen, especially on bills and all of these things, where concessions based on your voting, which happens in rest of the world, can be brought upon just by individual members being, you know, sort of reached out to in order to vote in favor of a particular bill or not. That way, there is more power within with an elected representative to at least negotiate and to barter for things that could help their constituents, that could help their state. I hope that that sheds a little bit of light. Thank you.
No, I think it brings about the sort of entire dichotomy that exists, right? That who is the legislator accountable to? Is it their party bosses or is it the voter? And I think also you've, I think, thrown a light upon what are the other sort of ways in which our legislators are restricted in the way they can exercise their role. Mr. Aleixo, you have been a long time MLA in Goa, and like Madhavan also joked about it, but Goa actually has seen a lot of these cases of anti-defection, and more recently actually we also saw in the recent elections, following the recent elections also. So what has your experience been, and what are your thoughts on whether this law should exist or not?
Thank you, Prachi, for giving me an opportunity. In fact, all the panelists are seniors. I think I'm a junior here. Well, Goa being a state, I think all of you mostly love to come there. And I think because of that, lot of anti-defection and everything is happening there, maybe. Anyway, see, we have one nice act also called the Gambling Act. See, we have made that Gambling Act into a anti-gambling act into a gambling act. See, we are so smart. We have made it into a, now we have defection, anti-defection law, we have made it a defection law. So now, from here if I start, I don't know where to stop. But then, I think the panelists are right. I think they are all seniors. I think Mr. JP Saab has said something nice. We don't know whether to agree or not to agree, because that is the situation now. The first part, I would look at it, in this existing circumstances, can you afford to, not have a, be free and speak what you want? This is one first part. Because the second part is, you could speak what you want in the assembly. I look at it as a legislator. You could speak what you want. You could speak against a bill. You could speak against budget session and not vote. Vote along with the party. The third part is, whether, if you have the right, you speak and vote against it. And the last part is, how do you do it now? If at all you want to go by what you are saying, or rather today's stand what you have taken, if we have to do it. Because it's very difficult. Now, for example, rightfully, wrongfully, one of the panelists said that, he says that, people want their job to be done. The people, the voters have become so demanding. It's difficult to, get, and our state being a small state, I think we have got hardly 25,000-30,000 voters. I think we must be knowing around 22,000 voters by face. At least after I getting elected 4 times, and I've done 2 ZPs. I know almost 20,000 people. The touch is so that people demand, they want something from you. End of the day, when election comes, they tell you what you have done for me. What you have done for the society is your duty. Whereas I look at myself doing something for society, something for the people, by and large. But the voter end of the day is asking me what I have done. So how do I act? What do I do? Can I afford now, for example, like in my constituency, like for example, an airport. The new airport is come. For example, South people didn't want the airport. Could I go against the government? Because the government took a stand, rightfully, wrongfully. Stand they took to have the other airport. But we could not, our voters don't want it. So how do I, what do I do? Walk out? Vote against when there is a whip? So I think, by and large, if you see, defections are taking place, you like it or not. Why shouldn't people not allowed to vote freely? Now what to do, you should tell. How about to bring the legislation? I think there are quite a lot of, for people who matter as far as legislation is concerned, bring about a legislation which we can do. Like you said, in the states, people can vote against. Like a Republican would go with the gun rule. So that way if something can be done for important things like budgets, like issues which matter in the constituency. And second, matter of principles. I know there are not, we don't find them nowadays. But some way, some powers could be given. So with this, I think most of the panelists have taken, I think one of the panelists took a long time, so I won't take a long time, I'll take a short time. So to make up for time, because people are, and I feel that now you should give us what to do and how to do. And the last, if not the least, if you have a strong legal system, I think all this doesn't matter at all. So if defection could be, there's some teeth should be given to by giving election commission. I don't know whether the election commission will really do a good job or not. Today everything is a big question mark. The answer is I don't know. Well, with this, I think I'll sum up and we can go ahead with the next. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Aditi ma'am, you have observed politics for decades now and you've been such a close observer. Do you see the anti-defection law how have you seen it play out? Do you also get a sense that it has, restricted legislators' ability to vote as per their conscience, or like sir was saying, think freely and act on how you feel? Have you seen that happen in your career?
This discussion has become really serious. So I'm going to tell you a story. And I'm going to tell you a story about a gentleman who I won't name, who belongs to Aleixo's state. He has been chief minister, he has been MLA in almost every government, and his fortunes are a bit low now, but he is a very, very versatile politician. And he, to the point where the last time he changed parties, he's been in most parties. The last time he changed parties, he actually decided that he's going to, he was required to change sides. So instead of changing sides, it's a hassle, right? So why not merge your party with somebody else, right? Of course, the fact is that he wanted to merge his party with another party, and the top two leaders of those two parties, the one that he belonged to and the one he was thinking of merging the Goa unit of the party into, were having talks in Mumbai about how to organize opposition unity and so on. So he is the sole MLA of a party. He wants to then decide that he wants to cross over to the other side, because he can see on the horizon that party B is probably going to be a constituent of the new government that's going to come up in Goa. And so he wants to cross the floor. How to do it legitimately? So why not merge the party, the entire unit, and just cross the floor? So now, I don't know, he's a very resourceful person, but he is very much a man of the people. His father was a loader on the docks. His parents were very ambitious about their children, possibly rightly so. So one brother was called Roosevelt and another brother was called Kennedy. But the fact is that he belonged to the people, and he felt that whatever he was doing was with the interest of the people in mind. So this is where the conflict or the tension or the pulls and pressures of politics come in. There are ways in which you can not exactly buck the system, but sort of find a via media around it. And I found that for instance during budget sessions, particularly during P.V. Narasimha Rao's time, it was a very traumatic time for Parliament. You had a new set of thinking and very painful economic reforms which the government had undertaken. At the same time, not every MP understood what those reforms were and what they could lead to, but they could see the effect of those reforms in their constituencies. For instance, the privatization of the Khetri mine in Rajasthan left a lot of people, a lot of labor, completely helpless, completely unemployed. They didn't know where to go, they didn't know anything else to do. And they attributed this privatization to the crisis of livelihood that they were facing. So, I mean, the government had to do that, but MPs were not able to comprehend it, worse, were not able to explain to their constituents what was going on. Many MPs felt very strongly about the economic reform. The way they expressed it, which was later to find, which was actually laying the ground for a wholesale political migration to another party, was via cut motions. So every time there was a budget, I remember very clearly, Rangarajan Kumaramangalam would come up with like 25 cut motions, that I don't agree with the government on this aspect of the budget, I don't agree with the government on this aspect of the budget. He knew they would be defeated, and it was against the party whip. But he went ahead and used a legislative instrument to express what was a political dissension. And that was a very thoughtful and intelligent way of doing it. Of course, he was laying the ground for his eventual sort of crossover to the BJP. But that's not the point. The point is he utilized an element which was there existing in the statute books to his advantage. And I think that was very clever. There are other issues which are also not directly germane to the anti-defection law, but can become a big issue, as we saw in Delhi government, for instance. And that is the office of profit. So you can have only X number of ministers. In order to compensate MLAs, the number of ministers you have in your government is proportional to the size of the legislature. So how do you accommodate the ambitions and the need for your MLAs to have a position or post, what we call a gadi and a jhanda? The way to do it is to give them office of profit. Is office of profit legitimate? Is it a way in which you can lure people from other parties into your parties and therefore buck the anti-defection law? That also is a question that we need to address. The last thing that I want to say is on the question of the quote-unquote the high command. I find it embarrassing as an Indian, as a voting citizen, and as a taxpayer, when people of the ruling or the opposition side chant a leader's name inside Parliament. It is embarrassing. But they all do it because they want to be noticed, and because they feel that if they are noticed, there will be, I mean, it could be out of how shall I put it, genuine love and worship, feelings of affection to your leader. Of course, it could be that. But it could also be a way in which you express what the High Command wants you to do. And I have seen from the press gallery of the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, leaders of the parties signaling to the rank and file, the backbenchers, to now start the chanting. This has happened both when the opposition when the Congress had an absolutely, huge majority in the Lok Sabha, as well as when the BJP has a majority in the Lok Sabha now. So I don't know, it's not really defection, but it kind of defines the idea of a high command which is which we need to review in the light of the anti-defection law. The last thing that I want to say is, what do you do when you have serious differences on issues of economic policy of your party? Many MPs have said that they don't agree with this or that they would like more information, say, on issues of security and defense. They would like more information on how much land has agreed, disputed, but how much land, disputed land, has been lost to a foreign country simply by, across border skirmishes and what the Americans call salami slicing. No MP can actually get up and ask this question, part of the problem is the whip, and part of the problem is the fact that you don't know how the party is going to react to this. And this again, to my mind, is anti-democratic, not just undemocratic. And for these reasons, I am fairly quite ambivalent about the anti-defection law, how much it has succeeded in working. The Goa MLA who was so ingenious is one example, one end of the spectrum. And the current standoff and kind of standstill on China's incursions into India is at the other end of the spectrum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a few questions based on, I think everybody's sort of come up with some really interesting observations through their entire careers. One thing, if we think about the setup of our parliamentary democracy, it is that whoever is in government should enjoy the majority of the entire house, right? The majority of the legislators should support whoever is in the government. But with the anti-defection law, that's actually not necessary, right? I'll take a few examples which I think Dr. JP, Mr. Bhatkhalkar and Aditi ma'am also said. Let's take the example of, say, a debate on a money bill or a budget, right? Where a disagreement almost amounts to a no confidence in the government. Now, the idea of a budget is that, the government has the taxpayers' money, and you have to ensure, it's the job of the legislator, every legislator, to ensure that the government is actually spending taxpayers' money judiciously. We recently actually saw that example in the UK, where Liz Truss lost her post as a prime minister because Tory MPs from her own party did not agree with her budget proposals. However, it entirely flips on its head in India, right? Instead of the legislator actually agreeing or disagreeing and then questioning the government, they have to agree with everything that the government has proposed in, say, a budget. So it effectively completely undermines the whole idea that the government needs to ensure that they have the support of at least the majority of the MPs. Instead, in, say, a no confidence, what the government has to ensure that they have the support of a few leaders, party leaders, as long as they have the support of the party leaders, you ensure that all their sort of MPs are towing the line and voting for you if a situation so arises. So which sort of brings back to the question that do you then see that the anti-defection law would work even in the case of, say, a no confidence motion also?
Prachi, you're right. In Afghanistan, many of you may be familiar, Loya Jirga, there's a tribal council, and each tribe has its own representatives. It's just in numbers. There's no question of democracy. Our parliament, our legislatures are now Loya Jirgas. Let's be blunt about it. But having said that, there is a point that you raised. In the parliamentary executive system we have adopted, if the head of the government does not have enough power to hold the group together, the country will not at all benefit. But my argument is the head of the government has significant institutional powers. For instance, the political patronage. You choose who are the ministers. You will sack the ministers at will. And up to a point, while enforcing rule of law and equity and equitable treatment, you certainly can also extend patronage in terms of geographic locations, constituencies. The third is, as a party leader, certainly you have some influence, even in genuine democracies with internal party democracy, in determining the fate of a member in future in the party. And it's working. You don't have to use your blunt instruments of throwing the fellow out of politics or the political party or the membership, etc. Having said that, it's also a fact that in the guise of opposing certain bills or certain provisions or certain proposals of the government, in India there's always an unholy union. Narasimha Rao's government was sought to be brought down by both BJP and CPM, polar opposites. BJP was and is for economic reform. CPM was and is against economic reform. Both are more than happy to come together and bring down the government. Now, if you talk about defections in that context, I think which is more moral? Is the stability of India at a critical juncture and the financial sector reforms after such a collapse in the country, at least out of compulsion because of crisis, more important, or the parliamentary games for temporary political gain are important? So it's much more complicated than this morality play. This whole, this is right, this is wrong, individual morality and larger political morality in the context of national interests are two different things. Therefore, let the forces play themselves out, however unpleasant it is. And the second point, just the point that Ritesh raised, very important. The answer to the constituency problems lies apart from what he suggested, the parliament legislatures functioning very well and effectively. We don't at all. Because there is a constitutional provision that the budget should be approved, and because the provision that within 180 days you should meet. Thank God these two are there. Otherwise, you probably would have one-day parliament. That's all. Today, we're reduced to that. But that apart, the real challenge is third-tier government. You see, the MLA today is the disguised executive for which he is not elected. But even in the media's eyes, and the elite size in the country, let alone the people size, he is the executive or she is the executive. And you are holding them responsible for something they have no power. It's a very strange mix. Authority and accountability are completely divorced, and therefore the system is utterly dysfunctional. So we have to look deeper rather than this kind of silly fixes. But let me just conclude on this point. While we should be completely opposed to anti-defection law and muscling the legislators and completely throttling them, we must also recognize that the head of the government's authority must never be undermined. That's why I very strongly argued, unsuccessfully because Dr. Manmohan Singh had a middle-class notion of morality, that the Prime Minister should never be brought under Lokpal. See, the leader of the nation, if you have questions every day, if you unsettle the government, even for a trivial thing, it's a very dangerous thing. Let the parliament decide, not some unelected individual who may be busybody at that time. There are some things which will be way above politics. The country's future is far more important, whichever be the party. I pleaded with Dr. Manmohan Singh. He agreed privately, but he already made a commitment, and he's like you and I, very middle class kind of morality, and therefore he could not go back on that. It's a bad idea. So net result is what happened. You have a colorless, orderless, tasteless Lokpal. How many of you can name Lokpal? Doesn't matter. We guaranteed the failure of an institution by doing something very silly and seemingly moral. So we have to think much deeper about the institutions and the long-term interests of the country without undermining the voice and the accountability and the freedom of action of the legislators.
Mr. Bhatkhalkar, Mr. Ali, anybody, if you would also like to sort of share your thoughts on it. Okay, sorry, just one. I think Mr. Ritesh Pandey has to leave in a bit. Parliament starts at 11. So if you want to have any closing thoughts, or if you want to sort of just respond to this question about do you think the anti-defection law, I mean, there has basically largely reforms have said that the anti-defection law should only be there when there's a question of no confidence in the government. Do you agree, or do you still see that even there, the onus is always on the government to ensure that they have a majority, and they should not have the party leader should not have the power to whip MPs or MLAs into position and agreeing on a certain line?
I think Mr. JP has been very articulate with his views here, and I totally agree with him. One of the things that I feel is, obviously, you know, as an elected representative, we would like to be approached on everything and be convinced, right? Because we have the duty to our constituents. And yes, on, you know, like on bills and everything, the party whip coming into place, I totally feel that that is something that stifles our ability to think, to actually go back and study about a particular bill and think of the pros and cons, because you're just going there to sit down and you know, get media time, TV time, say something controversial, you know, put out, get your pictures in, go out to the media, give a little, you know, give a little bite and come and let the whole tamasha unfold in front of you, and that eventually will get you votes, right? Because obviously, jo dikhta hai wo bikta hai, you know, what you can see sells. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that everything boils down for most people who are in politics, who are in electoral politics, to want to come back into power and represent their constituents. Now, we can either do that by, if we don't have powers, by trying to get, you know, trying to be controversial and say things that will get us out in the public eye, or on the other hand, come out with genuine, you know, there could be genuine negotiations behind the scenes if the party whip and anti-defection laws did not function in at various stages. Then essentially you would get something very productive that could come out, and you could even get members, and even it would, I think, encourage the younger generation who really want to make a difference, and they can see that, obviously, they can see that by getting there, they could actually sit down and negotiate better deals, better things for their constituents. So, yes, I think, you know, anti-defection laws, you know, apart from no confidence motions, I think it should not really come into place. But at the same point, you know, it becomes extremely, the example that JP just pointed out, that, you know, you had the communists coming together with the BJP, and that's like two extreme sides coming down together to bring somebody else down. And that also needs to be kept in mind, because it's very, very important to have some stability for the country to function. And you know, one more thing with stability, I would like to say, that because of all of this, and because of laws not being able to pass. And what I said earlier, the majority of the voter, what you can see is that in UP since 2007, there has been a majority government. And that has been the case in most states. And now that's the case in the center also for the last 10 years. People want, they are sick of not having things. I mean, this is what I would conclude. They're sick of not legislators or the government not being able to push through with their policies because of various ideologies that come together to form a government, and those ideologies then playing out. People have chosen to give full majorities to successive governments in UP and now in the center in order to see these policies move forward smoothly. And that too has to be taken into account. So that's what I mean, that slowly these things are being developed. And I think in time with debates like these and, you know, and especially with the people that are here, you know, this is the elite in sort of a way that we are discussing things with. But how many of us will, you know, how does this idea communicate right to the bottom, you know, or it's limited to arenas such as this? And if it's not going down to the bottom, then in the long run, the change is still slow, and it will come, I'm very positive, but it's going to come slowly. I think it's very important to, again, with technology and with the tools that are at hand, to develop things in the vernacular and deliver it to people and create this awareness. And only then moving forward, you know, I think changes will come, and hopefully we can see that, you know, individuals will get more rights, or elected members will get more rights to exercise their mandate. Thank you.
Just a brief comment, Prachi. You know, our whole approach generally is that politicians are all scoundrels, these are all bad fellows. No. 1999, many young people may not remember, Vajpayee government faced no confidence motion. Not one member defected, not because of moral fiber alone. If Vajpayee ji telephoned to people, do you think they would not have jumped? And there were so many small parties. And there was one member, Giridhar Gamang, who was actually Chief Minister of a state, who for the first time in our history voted to bring down a government. The Speaker was asked to decide whether he had the right to vote or not. The Speaker said, I will leave it to his conscience, I will not force him. You could have easily said, you cannot vote. I wrote a column praising the Speaker at that time. Immediately he called me and said, I'm so thankful to you. I'm terrified that because of me a government fell. My God, what a... So, you know, don't be too cynical about a political process. Yes, things are pretty messy. The answer is not bulldozing the legislators. That's much, much worse. The answer is letting the process play itself out, but with certain safeguards to ensure reasonable stability and reasonable progress for the country.
I have a small point. If at all these changes have to be done, I think there should be, you know, it should be not directly allowed this, because see, some legislators are new legislators. They don't know the rules of the house properly. They just start talking. So you have to bring about, it has to be, you know, a system of three-party members should be, you know, coordinated, or something has to be done where previously it will be notified, and then he'll be allowed to speak. Nothing to stop him, but to see that whatever he speaks is, you know, is the right thing. Because we have had legislators, new legislators, they just get elected. I mean, it is a democratic right, they have got elected. But when you go to the assembly, they don't know what to speak. They just start speaking. They have no relevancy to the subject, not knowing the subject properly, not knowing when to speak properly, you know, when is the time to speak. So, even if a system has to be brought, there has to be a proper system. So, at all, I think we should all, I think most of the speakers have agreed, at least the panelists have agreed. So, I being an independent, I can take a stand. Usually, even when I was in the party, I was taking a stand, took a lot of criticism for myself. I was not bothered about it. Because I believe that, see, we people are elected. I feel that we should exercise some right to decide what is right or wrong. Otherwise, we should not be called legislators. At least I feel. Doesn't matter. If at all somewhere down the line we have to take a decision, at least if I am in a position of power, I would certainly, call it a day where we take a decision what is right. That much of stand a legislator should have. Otherwise, he is not fit to be a legislator. He is just a goatee shop, just very sign there. That should not be. So I think I would look at it myself. I know I may be castigated for it, I don't know. But then I don't have an issue. Let it go the way it has to go. Somewhere down the line, I always believe this country has lasted not because of, like what JP Sahab said, scoundrels or whatever. It is lasting because of one decent guy somewhere down the line who doesn't want to have any cup of tea or something from anybody. He calls it his duty. And the last is, I always believe that, you have to get frightened of that decent guy in the corner, not the rogue in roundabout doing rounds. Because that decent guy in the corner can take you to the gallows, whereas the scoundrel who is walking around cannot take you anywhere. I think with this, we should have, if at all, we should have something to interact and allow this debate to go through. I think some system should be there. It cannot be just done just like that, because some system is in place. A proper method, proper way of doing it, like how they do it abroad. A proper discussion, proper, well brought out discussion, where you're given time to speak. Everything is to be done and accommodate. Because nowadays we get assembly, you get the budget session, you get 2 days to speak. You have 27, 30, 40 subjects. Important subjects. I think we have got much more subjects than that. You're just getting 10 minutes to speak. So now I'm speaking on one subject, I'm looking 10 minutes, 10 minutes apart, he's ringing the bell. The speaker is telling, Basa, Basa, sit down, he's telling, sit down. Now, whether to sit, now what has been thought out also, you don't remember because somebody is castigating you. So, proper way, everything should be done properly and that's all. I think with this, I think I should sum my view. Thank you.
I have a question for actually Mr. Bhatkhalkar specifically, because the example I'm going to use is from the recent incident at Maharashtra. So the anti-defection law also sort of brings about a certain kind of absurdity in our democratic setup, which is, so there is a party position everybody has to toe, right? Who decides this? Is it the leader in the house? Is it the prime minister or the chief minister? Or is it the party president? Because we've usually seen that these two persons are usually in alignment, but that may not always be true. And we saw that sort of happen somewhat in Maharashtra also. Mr. Thackeray, before the confidence vote actually could happen, Mr. Thackeray actually resigned and Mr. Shinde became the CM. But let's say Mr. Thackeray had chosen not to resign. Now the speaker had already chosen the whip from the Mr. Shinde's faction. And this whip would have then directed all Shiv Sena MLAs to vote against Mr. Thackeray. And Mr. Thackeray also had to vote in that same vote. Now what options did Mr. Thackeray in that case have? If he toes the party line, he votes against himself, loses his position, or he goes against the party whip, votes for himself, and gets disqualified and loses his seat. So it created this, it just sounds absolutely absurd, right? Like, how does a person in that sense vote? It also sort of subverts the whole point of which I was sort of saying earlier, that in a no confidence motion also, these kind of things could happen. So you've seen this happen in close quarters. So do you still sort of then agree that even in important decisions like this, this is how it should work, that there is some leader who's deciding, there's a 2/3 which forms the majority and then decides, and it completely depends on who is the whip at that time, and they have the power in that sense, and which is decided by the speaker. So what is sort of your thoughts on this?
See, your concerns are very right, but this is not related with stringent or less stringent anti-defection law. This is much more related with our maturity level, our systems, because there is no inner party democracy. As you ask, who takes this decision? As far as I know, barring BJP, all other political parties are family parties. So only one person is there, he takes decision. Do you hear that election committee within a Shiv Sena, or for that matter any other family parties? In BJP we have election committee, we have parliamentary board at different level, and so in my personal opinion it is much more related with the overall our systems, that which we have to improve. In ideal situation we do not require anti-defection law. In ideal situation, if at all I have to quit BJP, I can, and I can get re-elected. But in my personal opinion, unfortunately, reason may be different from everybody's perspective, but even after 70 years of independence, as a system, as a government, we failed to solve the basic problems of the people, citizens of this country. I every day sit in my office, people come for what? Today there is no water or water shortage, roads are not proper, I have some medical emergency, I am not getting bed or expenditure is too much. And those who can afford to all these things, they get elected again. That is the reality. If I want to get elected again, I have to sit every day, I have to address each and every issue which comes to me. Legally or ideally speaking, I am a legislature, means Vidhi Mandal. Vidhi means law. My only job is to make law, to keep eye on the expenditure of the government as a legislator. That is my only job. But if tomorrow morning I will say this, forget getting elected, I will not get ticket also. See, this is the reality. So there is no point in becoming cynical. That is as he said, majority people are good people, and even I will say majority politicians also. So don't color all politicians or all legislators with one brush. There is no point in that, because then it will be pessimistic and cynical. So overall our level of debate and everything, see, law, the biggest drawback of law is, in my opinion, personal opinion, law always works negative. It never works positively. And so tomorrow you can make amendment that 100 days Parliament and Assembly should be in sitting. Then what about the quality of discussion? As he said that now day by day it is reduced, I may totally agree. But my point is, how many MLAs are really interested to run legislature for 1 month? As he is from Goa, I remember one incident when Manohar Parrikar was CM. There was heated debate and he became angry and he declared that I will run this budget session for 1 month. Huh? Am I right? Yeah. And then an opposition member came and खत्म करो बाबा, इतना कौन चलाएगा, 1 महीना क्या चलाना है बजट, अभी 1 महीना बात करना एक एक मुद्दे के ऊपर. Yesterday I was telling to Manas, I got award in my first year. That time I said that there should be law कि any MP or MLA when speaks on the law, all these newspapers and media should publish that, mandatory. I have never seen that any newspaper in Marathi or in English in Maharashtra has published anything. Forget me, any other leader, he spoke on legislation. It's a very unfortunate thing. In assembly, in Maharashtra, what they say, आता काय business है, नाही आता काय हे नाही ते नाही, मग चला बिलं काढून टाका. म्हणजे बिलं काढून टाका म्हणजे निकालो फटाफट. अभी मेरे को याद है कि हमारी सरकार थी तब एक अंडरग्राउंड केबल डालने के लिए एक लॉ बनाया सरकार ने कि बाबा उसको कॉम्पेंसेशन ये वो. One minister of state was answering to that debate or law. I wanted to speak, so I raised my hand because in city we have issues with Mahanagar gas pipeline. Society do not permit for next society's connection. So I was consistently raising my hand. Then suddenly that day's working is stopped. And that minister told me, अरे बाबा मला तर काही कळत नाही, तू कशाला प्रश्न विचारत बसतो, ते आता उद्या परवा बघू आपण काय ते, तुझे कॅबिनेट मिनिस्टर आले की आपण ठरवू काय ते मला काही कळत नाही म्हणाला. अभी लॉ किसको समझता है, वो क्या करते हैं, but at the same time we should not forget that committees are regularly working. At least at parliament level they are working fantastically, no doubt about it. At state level, I don't know, but in Maharashtra, many committees are doing good job, definitely. And so, everything is not related with only anti-defection law, it is related with our economic, social situation. So, in my opinion, and the only way forward is consultation. And recently, I have gone through the first ever RBI's report on municipal finances. It is so pathetic, facts. Means many corporations do not have even accounting system. The RBI stated in their own report. No state has constituted finance commission. Again, in my own state, I know for sure, 4 or 5 years before, earlier government appointed finance commission. The guy was appointed as the chairman of that finance commission. He's supposed to complete his work within 1 year. So you have to tour Maharashtra, visit all corporations and all that. He kept on doing his work for more than 3 years.
Car, phone, fuel, subject.
Exactly. For that only. And unfortunately, he was the chief secretary of the state. So, this is the situation. So, legislature also has many problems, many. So, I think the way forward is, as I said, consultation, and definitely we are improving. I am not saying that we are not improving, but definitely subjects may be changing, vary from another topics and that, but we are improving. I am not pessimistic, at least. I am not saying that I have no use of my legislative power to solve problem of my assembly constituency. I don't think so. But,
to give a brief legal answer to your conundrum, Uddhav Thackeray conundrum. It's a second order problem, what you raised. The first order problem is, A, should there be the power vested in the legislators to change a leader or not? Unfortunately, Mr. Arun Jaitley and his team, they bungled in excluding, in not talking about that provision in the Constitution when they amended in 2003, 91st Amendment. And second, right now it's before the Supreme Court, and I hope court will understand that and take an appropriate decision. Because at least, even if it's not there, you must read it in the Constitution, it's implicit. Second, how can anybody be anointed like divine? How is it different from monarchy? I am the leader of the party, even if everybody except me don't want me, I have to stay there and you follow my orders. What absurdity is it? And then I'm very surprised that much of the media, much of the punditry in the country is all politically motivated, very polarizing, rather than going into substantive constitutional and democratic issues. We have to rise above Modi or Manmohan Singh or Sonia Gandhi and look at issues dispassionately with the constitutional spirit and democratic ethos in mind. I think we are singularly lacking in that.
Aditi ma'am, do you have any closing thoughts? I think we've still run slightly over time. Thank you everybody for the wonderful for a wonderful discussion. A lot for us to chew on also. And I hope the audience also enjoyed the examples and the viewpoints that all our panelists today had to offer. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much.
We won't have time for questions.
Yeah, sure. 5 minutes, yes.
5 minutes, we'll cut short the tea break by 5
Yes, that, yeah, unfortunately that cut short our tea break then.
I have a question, sir. I'm Professor Sriram Khanna from Consumer Voice. After hearing whatever you have been saying, the word that comes to my mind is juvenile democracy, which means our democracy still has to do many things before it becomes actually a mature democracy. But the question I have is, all these people running for tickets to become MLAs, MPs, party coming in power, there's another people who are sitting in the opposition, they want to come into power. What are they after? Are they after Janseva or are they after making money? Because I feel a lot of people who can't make money in their natural vocations or what they are qualified for, they want to jump ahead and change their economic class by finding ways of making quick money. So is it not that our entire political system is being driven with greed? People trying to get elected and get power by hook or by crook just to make money. Of course, with just exceptions of those who are in public service for the very cause of it. This is my question to you. Thank you.
Raji, I have to take this question because I know this is the common refrain in this country. I can absolutely assure you, almost every legislator in the country with the talent that they have and the hard work they put in contemporary economy can make tons of money outside. It's a great myth that money is what is propelling politicians. It's absolutely not true. I'll give you an illustration of a sarpanch. I was in a village in Karnataka, in a remote village some years ago. He came to visit me and others from my family. His son was to settle down in something. He needed 1.5 lakh rupees capital. Details are not necessary. He sought help. I asked him, just a few months ago, you were elected as a sarpanch. How much did you spend? He said, sir, 10 lakh rupees. I said, look, your son requires 1 lakh or 2, and it's very difficult to find the capital. Why did you spend 10 lakhs for this sarpanchgiri? He said, sir, unmadam, madness. There is a sense of deep-seated insecurity in our society, not politics. We want relevance. We want to be counted. Without a position, not even power. Where is power in the sarpanch? Thanks to the disgraceful 73rd, 74th amendments, we created dysfunctional local governments, overstructured, underpowered. It's a myth that they have any power. And yet, somehow, to feel that we are relevant, they get in. And in case of legislators, they come in to be disguised executors. Nobody is getting elected at least 95% to become a legislator. Because that's the way we perverted our system. Therefore, the point Maharashtra legislator talked about is very, very critical. Unless the third-tier governments are genuinely effective and accountable and empowered, you will never improve the second-tier legislature. Therefore, I would appeal to Madhavan and PRS to look at the third tier in order to improve the second tier. The second tier is performing the functions of the third tier. Nowhere in the world does it happen. Even in China, an autocratic country, 35 to 40% of the expenditure of the government is at the local level. India, maximum 3%. If you take out Mumbai, it will be 1% or something. We are absurd. Pakistan, Bangladesh, they are much better. We have an absurd democracy. Power is, earlier they used to say 3 M's, PM, CM, DM. Now I think increasingly PM and CM. Others don't matter at all. You can't run a system like this. It's not a morality issue. It's a functional issue. So it's not true that legislators are all rascals. They want to make money or they cannot. You know how much of organization and ability to reach out to people, to persuade them and deal with 1,000 demands a day? How much it takes? How much of organizational power? How much of ability and intellect to reconcile? So this debunking people as if, you know, that's one class and all the good people are outside, all the bad people have entered. It's very Indian. That is actually immature. A democracy takes time, decades of time, maybe centuries. Britain started in 1215 Magna Carta. Even 1900, Britain was in a thoroughgoing mess. At least until 1860s. Maybe 1860s, Gladstone's time, things improved. One MP wrote to his constituents a letter. He said, you know, and I know that I bought your constituency for £3,000 sterling. In those days, limited electorate, you simply spent the money and they shared it. You do not know that I know that you already sold this constituency to another gentleman for £5,000 next election. And finally he said, what you should know is that I already bought another constituency for £2,000. Therefore, both of us are winners. That was in 1860s. Things changed. Democracy is a messy system. It's a complex system. It's a difficult system in the best of circumstances. See what's happening in the United States. They can't even decide who won, who lost. At least in this country, we never heard that doubt. And there was always peaceful transfer of power with all our imperfections. Yes, bribery, yes, buying, selling, but there's peaceful transfer of power, barring one exception. Jagadambika Paul refused to literally go hand over power when the late BJP leader, he passed away, Governor of Kalyan Singh, he won the floor test. This man locked himself inside and the chief secretary and others said to bang the doors for 2-3 hours. Luckily, wisdom prevailed. Otherwise, there would have been a situation where there was no peaceful transfer of power. And there's paradox is, when you talk about anti-defection law, where is Jagadambika Paul now? He's a 2-time or 3-time BJP MP. So don't take out this whole middle-class morality from this discussion. Look at what's happening to the country and the political process. Don't make it, this is right, this is wrong, this is black, that's white.
Prime Minister said that प्रत्यक्ष रूप से हारे, प्रत्यक्ष रूप से परोक्ष रूप से.
No. And somebody mentioned Bhajan Lal. Bhajan Lal was asked in 82 election, you will win the elections, who will form the government? He said, doesn't matter who wins the election. If I am an MLA, I'll become chief minister. He became chief minister without a majority. Look at Chimnabhai Patel, lock, stock and barrel, 75. None of you, the young people above, were born at that time. I'm old enough to remember that vividly. Morarji Desai went on a hunger strike, fast unto death, to unseat Chimnabhai Patel's government on grounds of corruption. Indira Gandhi was forced to dismiss the government because of Morarji's stature. And then Babubhai Patel became chief minister after the election. Fast forward to 89. As an anti-corruption candidate, Chimnabhai became Janata Dal chief minister of Gujarat. Babubhai Patel had to become his senior minister in charge of Narmada. Fast forward to 1991, Narasimha Rao formed the government. Chimnabhai Patel with the whole party switched over to Narasimha Rao's party. Kya bol rahe hain aap? See, the very narrow view of all these things doesn't help. Look at the bigger political process and see how to make it mature and how to make the people wiser. Unless people understand the link between the vote and public good and taxes and services, our democracy will not improve. I come from a part of the country where a by-election cost 400 crore rupees for an assembly segment. 400 crores. Obviously, you know the truth. And that is higher than, for perspective I'm saying this, higher than the total expenditure incurred by both the major parties in Britain, both Conservative and Labour Party, in all the 650 parliamentary constituencies. Both the parties and the 1,300 candidates together spent less than one assembly by-election in a small state in a poor country. Now we are nitpicking. Think bigger.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful discussion.